Welcome everyone to the Introduction podcast. Today we have a new guest, Jimmy.
I'll give you a very brief intro of myself. So, my name is Jimi Li. I pretty much spent the past 25 years of my career doing transformation, all sorts of transformation,
Mhm.
digital transformation, now AI transformation across different industries. So, I used to work for GE, L'Oreal, Coach, News Corp. Now, at ALM as the chief technology officer. So quite a lot of industries, but one theme remain consistent is I drive transformation effort for companies.
That's awesome. We want to hear about the transformation road. Primarily, when I was preparing for the podcast, I was going through your profile and I saw a very interesting pattern. You do change industries a lot. For example, when you went to GE, it's like one of the most operationally disciplined organizations that was ever built. And then from that organization, you go to L'Oreal and Coach, which run on aspiration, emotion, brand identity. That's not a very natural move.
I actually get that a lot. The honest answer is GE taught me how to build system that scales, right? The discipline, the repeatable, the measurable about aspect of the system.
Mhm,
At GE, everything is process oriented and the technology serves the process.
mhm,
A system basically focus on accuracy, reliability, and they have very low risk tolerance. When I got to L'Oreal and Coach, the entire value proposition just flipped. Technology wasn't serving a process. It was really serving a experience or emotion, if you will.
mhm,
So you're building a digital experience where the goal isn't efficiency or accuracy, is a desire to own something, to own the product. And there has to be some kind of a personal connection with the brand. And the customer doesn't just want a faster checkout, a faster page, a better system. They want to feel something before they even interact with you, right?
mhm.
So that experience has to be there. So for example, a lot of the technology metrics, they mean very different things for those businesses. So let's take page load metric, for example.
Yeah.
It matters, right? So this page load speed is very important. To financial services company, a snappy performance means trust, reliable.
Mhm.
It matters for Coach, for L'Oreal in a very different way. So let's say for Coach, a slow loading image for $1,000 handbag, it just feels cheap. It gives
Mhm.
you that feeling, right? And the technology decisions like CDN architecture, image optimization, progressive loading, all of those is driven by brand perception. So the reason why I say that is for different customers, it means totally different things. And that's a fundamentally different relationship between technology and the business value.
Mhm.
So really what that taught me is something that I carried over into every other role that I have. So the best technology strategy doesn't start with architecture. It really starts with an understanding of what the business is actually selling. So at GE, we're selling reliability. You need
Mhm.
trust. At L'Oreal, we're selling aspiration. ALM, we're selling the expertise and the confidence when the lawyers, law firms making key decisions. So the technology playbook is completely different. Depends on who you're serving, who your customers are. And quite frankly, working for L'Oreal and Coach actually changed my assumption that,
Mhm.
if as a technologist, if you build a superior system, a solution, the adoption follows. A lot of technologists still believe that, but I do think that you have to build with the purpose. Depends on who you're serving. And I think that level of understanding, you can only build it when you work across different industries and see different things and know what matters depends on your customer.
100%. You cannot take it apples to apples and just assume that you're going to build the same stack in every company because every stack should serve the purpose of that company. And as companies are very different, the purpose is very different. Uh,
Absolutely.
100%. I agree with you here. So when you went into ALM, it was also quite a big jump as well from coaching L'Oreal. It's years because it's a very interesting experience.
Yeah. I think quite frankly, the opportunity just presented itself. But I also had a very clear picture in terms what I wanted. So I've worked pretty much most of my career for large corporations. And I wanted a change, right? I want to work
Hmm.
for a company that technology is not as only a support function.
Hmm.
Ideally is the product itself, or at least is a very important part of the product. And I wanted an environment where transformation wasn't just optional and you
Hmm.
have to do it, right? And now that just, some modernization work here and there, but is basically an environment, a system where we have a clock ticking and the business model depends on that. That's the
Hmm.
environment I thrive in.
Hmm.
So PE environment definitely give you that clock, which a lot of people treat it as a kind of a challenge or a constraint.
Hmm.
But I actually look at it as clarity. So you don't waste 18 months or 24 months socializing a strategy. You just have to move. You have to execute. So clarity is super important in this case. And what I saw in ALM specifically, was the company was sitting on amazing asset, decades of curated legal content, data intelligence, and built by people who are just
Hmm.
experts in this domain, in this field. But the technology, quite frankly, when I first got in, didn't really match the value of the content and the data.
Hmm.
The
I see.
content and data was world class. The platform was kind of a generation behind. So the gap is exactly where I do my best, right? To make a
Hmm.
difference. So when you work across different industries, you start to notice things the other industry that miss. So the pattern recognition that you accumulated over the years, you pick up the trade in one place that doesn't exist in legal. And that's how I apply it. Quite
Hmm.
honestly, I think that really becomes my kind of my edge or advantage.
Yeah.
Not to say that, as part of the process, you learn a different industry quite quickly. And the more it's like a muscle memory, the more you practice it,
Hmm.
the faster it gets in terms of adapting to a new industry and learning the nuances. But really the pattern or the question is always the same. So how do you take a proprietary domain specific knowledge and deliver it
Hmm.
digitally at scale in a way that your customer is willing to pay for it? And really that's what I've been doing for the past 20 years.
It's very interesting because your experience played a huge role. It's an edge, as you just said. But I'm curious, let's say somebody is listening to this and thinks, oh, yeah, my career, I resonate with Jimmy. I'm spending most of my career in corporations and I have this feeling, I have this urge that I want to go and join a smaller company and then have the same kind of edge that is less corporate or just different than corporate. What were the things that you had to change immediately?
So there are two things I can think of. Number one is speed. So I really have to unlearn my assumption about the speed of change an organization can absorb. So I came in actually to a B2B business, which ALM is, with a kind of a consumer brand mindset. So, for example, at L'Oreal, you can redesign a digital experience and ship it within a few weeks. In fact, we launched more than 300 websites globally within a year
Well,
because you can do that because the customer has very little switching costs. They don't really care about your old platform, your old system, as long as the new one works.
hmm.
ALM's customers are mostly lawyers, attorneys,
Yeah.
and lawyers have integrated these tools into how they practice. And the platform isn't just a product to them. It's part of their workflow. It's their research methodology. In some cases is their muscle memory. And you can't just ship a new UI and expect adoptions within the lawyers community immediately. You have
Uh-huh.
to, let's just say, if you move a search function or change how the results are getting displayed, you really disrupted someone's billable hour workflow.
Hmm.
And between you and me, for lawyers, billable hours is everything, right? So what I had to unlearn, so I had to learn that in a kind of a domain expert business, and speed to market isn't the metric, right?
Hmm.
This is where I learned in consumer oriented business, speed is everything. Speed is important. But for a B2B company and in the traditional market, speed to adoption is the new metric. And those are very different things. I can ship really fast, but the product team hadn't if they hadn't met the change to actually how the user,
Hmm.
what I ship is useless, right?
Yeah.
So the second thing I had to unlearn was that a smarter system or a better algorithm equals to a better product. So at ALM, we could, let's say, we could surface relevant cases instantly, you know,
Hmm.
to
Yeah.
the lawyers, attorneys. But the value is not really in the volume or the speed. The value that our lawyer customer care about is really the expertise and the connection they have with us. So they trust the human taste. And
Hmm.
this is where the human connection really matters. And they don't really trust AI generated data or content. They trust human judgment.
Hmm.
And that connection is very important for us.
Interesting. You mention quite publicly right now the thing that is called, that you call innovation theater. And I'm sure that you have seen a bunch of innovation theaters play out throughout your career in multiple teams and in conversation with other CTOs. Somebody will understand that they are a part of innovation theater right now.
Yeah, what an innovation theater is when it comes to innovation, it's very easy to generate a lot of ideas, a lot of activities, POCs.
Hmm.
But 3 months later, 6 months later, you see very little impact of those projects. Did they generate real P&L impact? Did they generate additional revenue? Did they reduce cost? So those are the things that matters to a business,
Hmm.
especially in a PE-owned business environment. So innovation theater is the word that you described. There's a lot of activities, but very few results. But when you look at it, first of all, you have to separate the person or the people who is running those programs and the
Hmm.
program itself. The people who champions innovation theaters or they're part of it, they're not bad people at all, right? They're usually the most ambitious people within the team.
Hmm.
And they just don't have, or they were not given a framework to enforce the discipline to connect their ideas with the P&L outcome.
Hmm.
So when you talk about that, my approach was to, let's change the framework, right? And not to change the ideas or projects. So I introduced a very simple discipline. So every AI initiative, they have to be categorized into three categories.
Hmm.
So whether it improves the employee efficiency or it
Okay.
raises the product margin or there's a entirely new revenue opportunity for us to get into. If you cannot describe the P&L impact or the business impact in a short 1 or 2 sentences, you're not going to get the funding. And I do that in partnership with the CFO, the CEOs. So it's well enforced within the company. It's not getting funded, those projects, it's not going to be funded not because it's a bad idea, right?
Hmm.
It really, because there's a gap between a good idea and a good business case. And when you make that discipline visible, when you make that framework visible, people know, right? People will come back with real numbers. And that's the difference it make. It's the difference between your project just cute or versus your project need a business case.
Yeah.
The latter one is much easier to communicate and people get it. The other thing I would say that really addressed the innovation theater syndrome is you have to
Syndrome.
create visible wins early, right? When people see an AI initiative that actually move the needle, move a number,
Yeah.
it's not a demo, not a pilot, it's actually tangible financial outcome. It really reset the entire organization's expectation. Those innovation theater stuff disappeared, and you really don't have to be the one to say it, and people will see it right away, especially in a PE environment. When I mentioned the clock, right? The clock is your friend.
Ticking.
When everyone knows there's a transaction horizon, the clock is ticking, the tolerance and their own tolerance for a project that does not deliver measurable impact is naturally drops. So I didn't have to be the one who enforce it. Um, the timeline is,
Yeah.
the process is.
Curious, when you evaluated the assets that you have in ALM, the platform, the data, and you started implementing projects, transforming, innovating, you had a great mandate in increasing the revenue and cutting the costs, data here. And then we're supplying this to our customers for them to be more productive. Did you ever discover that the operators, the people that were actually working on gathering this data or on using this data, that they are making decisions differently from than the one that you expected? For example, that their day to day, let's say there is a documented workflow for the thing that it's the procedure. Have you ever noticed that people were avoiding that workflow and doing things their own way? So something that you on the technology level did not design or didn't foresee, but in reality, people were doing that process that way.
That's a great question. And I think what you're describing actually exists in every single organization on the planet.
Yeah.
So what I discovered personally is, especially for those knowledge intensive operations, there are two kinds of workflow, as you described. There's the documented workflow where there's a SOP,
Yep.
let's say the style guide should follow this. Here's editorial publishing processes is well documented. And here's a QA checklist. And then there's another workflow, which is the actual invisible workflow that lives in people's head.
Mm-hmm.
We're in a hallway
Tribal
conversation.
knowledge.
So when you don't know something and you ask your colleague, how does it work? And they say, hey, ask Tom. He knows exactly how to handle that, but we don't have a documentation for it. So when we started building, especially building AI systems or adopting AI internally to assist with the, let's say, editorial or research processes, right? We quickly realized that documented workflow was maybe just 30 to 40% of the
Really?
decision making. The other 60% is really the institutional judgment. It exists in people's head. So, for example, an editor would look at a piece of a
Mm-hmm.
legal analysis and make a call about what to include or not to include in an article, in analysis, based on their years of experience or years of understanding what the lawyers actually need
Mm-hmm.
or actually care about. And very few of those are written down anywhere. And that's just what they call the editorial experience.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a big challenge because it just means that you cannot automate the process if
Mm-hmm.
it's not well documented. You had to extract the invisible knowledge first. And a lot of people didn't even know they had it. They just say, I just know, or you feel it.
Mm-hmm.
To a certain extent, it's real, right? It's true, but it's something that you cannot hand over to an engineer and say just build it, right? So that's the most difficult challenge. So the automation effort became in the large part a knowledge capture effort.
Mm-hmm.
When we actually have to adopt AI and adopt automation, it really changed how I think about AI in the expert domain, like ALM. So the
Mm-hmm.
technology isn't the hard part. Mapping the invisible decision architecture is. So that means understand what people actually do versus what they say they do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the hard part. And if you skip it, you're just building something that's technically impressive, but practically useless.
100%. I couldn't agree more. Like in my day to day, I see this all the time. We work with banks, for example, and banks have a lot of different processes where you might have think, well, everything is standardized, everything is mapped down, but reality is very different because let's say you have your automation or RPA that was able to hit 80% of the cases. The other 20% would still go to humans. And then those humans, although they will operate by procedures, no one ever was able to explain to me why a certain one person in the claims department was processing this claim one way, and the other person for the same claim they made a different decision. Nobody knows that. Nobody really captures the decision that lives in their heads of the people. Where are they going? Where they're clicking? So it makes perfect sense. You never know. So, in your opinion, across four different industries, four companies, about culture, we can think about technology stack, we can think about data, we can think about budget. Is there budget allocated? Leadership alignment. What do you think is the main thing that actually determines whether it's going to be a successful AI program? Is it mapping or is it something else?
So that's a difficult question to answer, but I'll give you a kind of a little bit long-winded answer. there are two major factors. Number one is the technology readiness. So what I mean by that is technology readiness means, the model capability, the data architecture, right? Is your data ready for consumption for AI? And those I consider the easy part because the whole industry is addressing all those challenges. And you can see within the past few months, every week, there's some kind of improvement where you see the capability in model 2 months ago versus now. It's a night and day difference. So I'm not as worried about that. And for me, the data challenge is real, but is clear, is addressable with effort and funding. So that's not the major limiting factor.
Okay.
The other factor is the people factor, which I think is going to be a very difficult one to solve. So let me break that down for you. So in terms of the people factor, number one is the incentive.
100%.
Yeah, the incentive, and I'll break it down a little later, right? Why it happens, how do you address that? And number two is actually the context, is the invisible knowledge I was talking about. How do you extract that from people? Will people willingly to give it? And a deeper discussion could be, is that knowledge belongs to the person themselves or belongs to the organization? Can you even extract it?
Where do you draw the line? Yeah.
And really, when you talk about incentive, is usually what you see the behavior is it's a middle management relationship with ambiguity. So what I mean by that is it is how well they can tolerate the uncertainty that comes with the new way of working. It's very easy for C-suite to mandate it. Everybody have to use AI. It's very easy for us to enforce as frontline workers. They have to adopt it. You just have to do it. It's a policy. And they can execute faster than we think they could. But the middle layer is really the directors, the VPs, the senior managers, the people who own the processes and are measured on predictability. So they're the one who either create space for transformation or they'll just quietly limiting the transformation through, let's say, compliance, process gates, risk escalation. So a lot of them behave in the risk adverse manner. And it's not a criticism at all. And those are the people who actually keep the organizational running. Their instinct to protect stability or take a risk averse approach is actually quite rational. But AI, especially when it comes to adopting AI within an enterprise, it does introduce ambiguity into the processes that were previously deterministic, right? So if you follow this process, you know for sure it will work. So for example, a search that always returns the same result, after you introduce the agentic search, all of a sudden it returns something a little bit different every time because it's generated. And a process that was fully human now has an AI recommendation layer in it. So that kind of an ambiguity is where the value lives. And you should see the value, but it's also where the middle management anxiety lives. It's human nature.
It's very interesting. I never thought about it that way. Basically, what you're describing is you, as the transformation or innovation leader in the company, you should build such a point B where we're going. And this point B should be aligned with point Bs for the middle management, for the people that are doing the actual work. They should see their own place in that world, in that point B that you have written for them. And then they would follow, they would be able to implement. Because if they don't feel themselves to be a part of that point B, then they're just gonna quietly sabotage and any AI initiative, no matter how great it is on the paper and from the technological perspective, it just won't be adopted in the way that is expected.
Well, yeah, I guess you can say that, but I guess the two takeaway is number one, you have to address the incentive. Number two is creating a psychological safety environment for them to execute.
Very interesting. And I kind of kept the very interesting question for the end, for the dessert. Let's talk to CTO, CIO, or any technical executive that is sitting right now inside a PE-backed company. Maybe they're like 18 months from a transaction, 12 months from a transaction, going through this process and executing it successfully?
So I think it's very natural for a CIO or CTO in a PE-backed company to prepare for the technical side of things, right? So, your technical architecture, how do you scale and security postures, platform modernization. Those are super important. Don't get me
Mm,
wrong, you have to do it. But at
yeah.
this point, I think those are just table stakes because the buyers, they're expecting a working modern technology structure. So it's not a bonus point. So the
Mm-hmm.
bonus point is, I think, is your data. So if you think about AI, what's important for AI? What is the number one factor that's kind of limiting AI tooling effectiveness right now?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's actually data.
Yeah.
It's the kind of data AI has access to. The more data, the way that it works is the more data that it has, the more quality data it has, the better, the more accurate the AI will become.
Mm-hmm.
It will be more useful that way. So I think the logic going forward is going to be number one, data as a moat. What is your data strategy? Are you treating your data as if it's a product? Maybe you're now selling it, but
Mm-hmm.
you should treat it as a product. And
It's an asset,
it's definitely an
at
asset.
least.
It differentiates you from the rest of the market, right? It's something
Yeah.
that you have that unique to you, your company, or maybe it belongs to the user data. Maybe it's the proprietary data assets that you have. All of those matters more than ever. So in my experience, the buyers actually, they did a quick walkthrough of our technology structure. They didn't ask that much questions, but what they did grill me on was the data. So they want to know what proprietary data that we have. How is it structured? What's the data lineage? Who maintain it? How are we using it? How does it differentiate from the rest of the market? How do you commercialize it? Right? How much does it value? How much does it worth? So those are
Yeah.
the things that they grilled us very deeply during the due diligence process. And so if I have to describe it, is they're buying the future. They already know the present. They're really
Mm.
looking for a reason, a growth story. So the second thing I can think of, which is probably harder or more difficult for PE-owned company, is to identify and pressure test your key person risk. So
Really.
yeah, is in a PE environment, resources are usually lean, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't have like larger corporations where you have backups, right? You have your succession plan, figure out. So in a PE environment, the structure, the work chart is usually very lean.
Mm-hmm.
And not only from a people perspective, also from a knowledge perspective. So let's say if your best engineer left tomorrow, what knowledge walks out the door, right? Can you answer that? And what's your counter for that?
Mm-hmm.
So really, I think that's a challenge that you have to have enough time to prepare for. It's not something that you can prepare in 3 months. It's
Mm-hmm.
something that you have to start doing now, especially with AI. How do you build that context, that knowledge layer? I will probably just suggest that everyone who's in the CTO, CIO position have to build that context layer for your enterprise. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the layer that capture the institutional knowledge. That's the layer you can almost call it a second brain for your company.
The
And
twin.
the twin, yeah. Really, I think the success for AI adoption depends on the second brain and the context, the data that you feed into AI.
This is gold, Jimmy. I think that anybody listening this, they receive a good shot of motivation to actually go and implement at least one thing from from the podcast, because you shared a few of them. It was very practical, and this is what I really enjoyed in this conversation. It's always good to speak with somebody who knows and owns the process, not just the theory part, but the practical part, because you have executed multiple times. Thank you so much for the insights and for the time that you've shared with the audience. Of course, I'm going to leave all of your links at the podcast. And if anybody is listening this and wants to give Jamie a shout or just message, I'm sure you would be open to chat with people.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nick, so much for the thoughtful questions. I really had a great time and really enjoyed our conversation.
This is a pleasure. Thank you.